Here you are at a data and AI event, and suddenly we're talking about software testing. Seems completely irrelevant compared to everything that we've seen today, but at the same time, it's not, because you can only have proper AI by testing it, right? Um, so when you look at us at Brightest, I'm the domain lead AI there. So that means that it is my responsibility to make our business AI driven, and by extension also our customers' business. Yeah. So in essence, we try to revolutionize software testing by the means of AI. So to give you a bit of context, who is Brightest? We are a software testing consultancy company at the core. Yeah, we exist since 2016. We employ 150 something consultants on a day-to-day basis, and they offer software testing services to our clients. Yeah. So from that perspective, you might say, this is boring. Huh? Just another consultancy company coming to pitch their consultancy services. They happen to use ChatGPT, so probably that's what this talk about. But it's not actually. Where do we differentiate with our competitors is actually the technology area, because you see this beautiful triangle here: people, process, and normally it would say tools in every book, but we branded it as technology because tools wouldn't do it justice. Brightest, by the inside, is divided into multiple technology domains in which we really have a continuous R&D focus. So it's not that we do some small proof of concepts. If we identify certain technologies that can be disruptive in our market, we really pick them up. We create a vision first, we align it with a business strategy, and then we start to do R&D with the technology to make that happen. And one of the things I'm going to show you today, including some customer cases, is what we built in our AI domain, which is named Sky. And Sky basically stands for Software Quality AI, which is a testing platform that is built to increase the productivity of our testers, so we can make testing a little bit cheaper and better for our customers. Yeah. So you might be surprised about this statement, and that is that a professional software tester before AI still spends around 50 to 70% of their time on manual and repetitive tasks. And you might think, like, how is that? I mean, they're test automation tools since the 90s, yeah, or even a bit before that. And the answer to that is yes, there are, but none of those have been a silver bullet up till now, right? Because once you have test automation, you have scripts and you need to maintain those. If you want to structure your testing effort and write out structured test cases, as you must do in compliance-heavy environments like hospitals, medtech, pharmaceuticals, you're quickly spending a large amount of time on manual, on repetitive work. For every new software feature that you're implementing, you need to write the new test cases, you need to maintain your automation script. So that's the majority of the time of manual work that we classify here. So we're not talking about the actual test execution, because that can still run automated, but it's keeping the quality of the tests high so that you can keep the quality of the I'm sorry, so that you can keep the quality of the software under test high, right? In essence, this wouldn't really be a problem unless when we go to look at environments that experience a lot of peaks in quality assurance. That makes it really difficult for our people to do our job, because either they are put in the project a little bit too late, so they have a lot of work and they need to do it in a short period of time. For example, we had a customer came to us, say, okay, I'm doing an ERP migration to an entirely new system. It's basically the beating heart of my multinational company, and I want you guys to test it. They say, okay, great. When is the release planned? They say, oh, we had it yesterday. That's a problem. So that's the part where we have to say, okay, if we want to test this really quickly, we need to assign a lot of resources on that, meaning 10 plus something people, and mostly the answer then is we only have budget for one. Which is a pain, because that one person will then have to cut corners to do his or her job, and that person will not be happy or motivated because they're software testers. they want to have everything tested and make sure that the software is being put in production as good as it can be, nearly bug-free. And they know that in this setting, they can't do that. That's not a good business for the consultant. They will not be motivated and good talent will leave you. It's not a good business for the customer because their product will still have big, major business blocking issues. And it's not actually good for our reputation now, is it, as a software testing company, that you say, oh, that's a customer of ours, but yeah, they still have a lot of issues in production. So when AI came up, we first saw that a little bit as a threat, and we thought like, oh, can generative AI replace software testers? So we started experimenting, and we basically came to the conclusion that we can use AI to unlock a form of hyper-automation in the software delivery life cycles of our customers. So to put it in plain English, that means that we can now maximize the QA coverage, meaning upping the amount of tests that you can do and getting a better quality of the production applications, and still reclaim the valuable time of the people who do the testing. So if there are people who are doing the testing internally, for example, in a warehouse management migration track, you would have people who actually work in the warehouse use the software as a matter of testing, but those people, of course, has a full-time job because they actually do run the warehouse. So we help them to reclaim their valuable time so they can keep executing their job and spend as minimal effort in testing as possible without compromising on quality. On the other hand, we help our consultants not to cut corners and do more with the time they have at customers. Yeah. So you might wonder now, okay, so how have you done that? Well, we built our own AI ecosystem, and I'm purposely calling it an ecosystem because we didn't go about it in the traditional way, saying like we're going to build our own language learning model. Because why? We didn't have a ginormous amount of data. We didn't have the budget as well. Training an AI is expensive. I mean, have you seen the price per compute hour on Lambda Labs? It's starting from $8 per compute hour, and you need thousands of millions of hours. Not sure that's the type of budget we had. So we said, okay, we're going to build a multi-model AI engine that we base on the technologies that are already there and relatively mature. So we partnered up with parties like OpenAI, Mistral, Google, NVIDIA, Microsoft, AWS, Anthropic, Cohere, and it doesn't stop there, to use the best versions of their language models that are there. And then we went in our own company and we looked, okay, what knowledge do we have to actually fine-tune this thing, right? So we had knowledge that we could extract from our senior consultants, structure that data, use it to actually embed that knowledge in those existing language learning models. And we have what we call the Bright Academy, which is an online training platform for testers. So that is a place where we also have a lot of testing specific knowledge. For example, ISTQB standards, trainings on behavior-driven development, 12 rules of clean code. It's all on there. So we embedded that in those existing models and created an AI ecosystem that for us could, for example, take user requirements from an application, generate the tests and park them somewhere in your test management tool, then inject the test data you need to do those tests in your application under test, and give you the backbone of the automation code. And we wouldn't do that with just one prompt or just one language learning model. No, we would use every language learning model in their own strength. For example, we know that GPT-4 is fairly okay at generating textual context, okay? But we also know that Mistral offers CodeStral, for example, which is very, very good in generating code, which is what we need as test automation engineers, yeah? So we can have AI do 60% of our work and then offer it back to us for verification. And that ties into what Lars said in the first presentation. Somebody needs to take ownership about what comes out of the AI, and that's what we said from the beginning. We're going to take the human in the loop and actually make sure that AI can accelerate the job of a software tester but inevitably presents its result to a human at the end of the cycle, so a human can still either correct it somewhere or accept it the way it is if it is good. Yeah, so it's not an autonomous testing system. We offer that in two formats. Either you can use it as a conversational testing assistant, read a form of ChatGPT visually, but specifically made for software testers with intelligent buttons that are linked to the applications that you use. And behind those buttons are what we call virtual test engineers, which are small robots that can do software testing tasks independently, 24/7, very, very fast, 1,000 times faster than any human could. But we didn't stop there. So as you probably already saw, it's not just ChatGPT, it's smart AI orchestration that we're doing here. But then we started pulling trends out of the systems that we had to test a lot. Like we have a lot of companies coming to us to test their newest SAP migration, to test their newest instance of Salesforce that they recently bought or implemented. So we kindly asked those parties to provide us, for example, with the user guides of their systems, with the API information of their systems, with the legal information of their systems, and also pre-embedded that knowledge in our ecosystem, meaning that if we encounter a customer that has, for example, a Manhattan warehouse management system and is going to upgrade it, and they have nothing else in terms of documentation or no structured user requirements whatsoever, is that we can still generate those tests out of the box and that our people can use it within the same ecosystem that we discussed one slide back. Yeah? So we can still build those virtual test engineers on top of that. I think it's time, because I see a lot of people nodding now, okay, but probably you want to see something, right? So I have this use case here, which is from the UZA, which is the Antwerp University Hospital, and they are implementing what they call an EPD. It's basically an ERP system for hospitals, right? And what we did is we indexed all of that information into our engine and then used it so that test cases can be generated because it's needed there. They are working to go towards a GAMP 5 certification, meaning that they rigorously need to document all the software testing they do on systems which handle patients, which is everything in a hospital, basically. So we firstly built the conversational assistant, and behind that we built virtual test engineers to help the local testers at the hospital to generate structured test cases so they don't have to write them entirely by themselves. To give you an idea, when I say local testers at the hospital, that's the surgeon who just operated your wife, who after work needs to look at his part of the electronic patient system and see, okay, how can I acceptance test this in production? Yeah? They do it out of goodwill, writing the test cases. Yeah? It's the nurse who's taking care of you. It's the cleaning lady who has to input something on the EPD. There are not that much professional software testers around in the hospital. In this case, the professional software testers are 3 people for the whole hospital. Yeah, and all the rest is medical staff. So what we built was this chat interface that goes through the 4,000 pages of release notes of the EPD, where you can then ask it questions specifically for your hospital department and the test cases that you want to generate. By clicking that button, it will insert those test cases generated by AI very neatly into your quality management systems. And that's really on a deep level. It's not just a title or do this and do that. No, it's a title, it's detailed instructions, it's preconditions. For example, if you want to test a certain feature in a system like that, you will firstly need to have a patient who has a certain medical condition for you to actually enable that business flow, right? So our system will also take those preconditions out of the documentation and put it there in your test management system. So if you put this in front of a nurse, that she still knows that she might have to create a virtual patient. And then you say, okay, creating a virtual patient, because that was actually the second use case here. it is very hard for a hospital to test applications in a test environment because they can't just take a copy of all patients from production and put it in a test environment. They need to anonymize it. They need to make sure that it isn't traceable to the real world. So the best way to process sensitive data is actually to not process it all and virtualize it entirely. And that is what we're doing here. Within that same interface, we're asking it to make a virtual patient for somebody from the Netherlands checking in the Antwerp hospital. And then we go ahead and inject that data from the conversation in the application under test, right? And we can do that for any type of database, whether it's relational, document-based, or if you're already busy with AI quite a lot, it can be vector-based as well. Yeah. I saw my colleague telling me that I still have 5 minutes left, so I'm going to do this a bit faster. We can also connect it live to the application landscape that your testers work in. So for example, if you have a development team and you have a few QA engineers in there and they work in a tool like Azure DevOps, it can lively read out requirements based on the certain status and then kick off a virtual test engineer, of which you see a visual representation of here, who will then actually determine the functional scope of what needs to happen and generate all that test cases. In this case, it's not going to only generate the test cases like in text, the manual test cases, so to say. By extension, it will also generate the backbone of the automation code that can then be checked by an automation engineer whether it is sufficient or not. Yeah, the video is a bit slower than me talking, so yeah. I'm running a bit behind here, but it's going to go to the automated tests in a bit. You see, eventually it created 18-something tests, I think, for this functional scope, which are completely written out, step by step, what needs to happen. So you can give that to anybody in the organization and they can still execute it. Of course, after a review, because as you can see, it puts it in draft. The intention is that a human actually reviews it, and when it corrects it, it's being pushed back over API to our AI ecosystem, so to get the bias out, right? And then by extension, if you label it with the label automation, it is going to grab your automation technology, whatever that is, and we use CodeStrel there to actually generate the automation code. Yeah? So if you run this, it will just run, and if it doesn't recognize certain objects on the screen, it will just prompt you that you as an automation engineer still needs to fill this in. But this means if you're a test automation engineer, that 60% of your preparation work has already been done. You're shifting your role from creation to validation, and you can go from requirements to automated tests in theory and in practice in minutes instead of days. Yeah? You can go there from your requirements throughout your test cases, throughout automation. In the demo you just saw with those tooling, but hundreds of other apps as well. Yeah. We built our ecosystem in such a way that today we connect to thousands of IT applications, literally. Now, to close on this topic, you might think about, okay, that's great, but what about my data or your customers' data? And that's where we are a bit different. It's basically your data always belongs to you, and we don't want to faff about with special legalities there. We can put it in your environment. So we don't ask the customer to bring their data to our AI. We bring the core of our AI to the customer, and we can set it up in their own private cloud or even on-premise if they want to, but then we have some very specific requirements for hardware, so not much people really want to take it on-premise on machines from the 90s. That wouldn't be a great idea for performance, but in their private cloud, it's easy for us to deploy it there. And we have some use cases I hope to inspire you with. So in a Dynamics 365 migration within a medical context with a lot of regulatory compliance, we just did the work of 3 months in 3 weeks by using AI without actually upstaffing the team. So that was a very good success for that customer and for us. And we did the same in a track for Atlas Copco. They using SAP, where they had to mobilize quite the amount of business users for every recurring release, where he said, okay, firstly, we're going to automate those tests so you don't have to mobilize your business users, but we're also going to make sure that the automated tests are maintained by AI, so that you don't have to spend a lot of time pre-validating those tests again for every release you do, but that an automation engineer can only spend a small amount of his or her time on that to do that and save a lot of time and by extension a lot of budget. So that's our take on what we do with AI. I know it's a lot less conventional than the other topics on the calendar, but I do hope that you learned something and that you think this is ambitious. And if there are any questions afterwards, I'm still here at the event, so feel free to approach me.